For many, at a distance, the city of Jerusalem is a sacred place, a place where the ideals of religion come together in the hope of Abraham. For some, it's a place of pilgrimage. For others, it's a place of walls and barriers. There are shadows on the walls of this city compacted together that few tourists ever get to see. He was sitting here 22 years ago in the middle of May. The garden tomb was closed. The assassin's bullet hit him in the head after he finished sipping on his water. The Reverend White, who was the curator at the garden tomb here, came out, found his limp body, 1 or 2 breaths left, and Paul passed away. The shooter was named Aladdin Bahazin. He was part of the Abu Mesa gang. According to the Jerusalem police, it was the most dangerous terrorist gang of that generation. 25 members from East Jerusalem were involved. The MO was quite simple. A bullet to the head. The shooter would take the gun and dispose of it, telling the next person in his cell group in the hierarchy where he disposed of the gun. The 9mm Beretta had shot 4 bullets in an attempted assassination effective on 3 citizens. Paul was the 4th and the final bullet. 2 days later, Paul's assassin was arrested with the rest of the Abu Mesa gang. The assassin confessed that there are shadows in the walls of Jerusalem where the light of the gospel of Jesus Christ has not yet shined. In these shadows on the wall, we find violence and hatred, man's inhumanity to man, shown clearly in the city of peace. For those who are called to the service of Christ in this city, it is essential that we struggle to come out of the shadows and proclaim the light of the gospel of Jesus Christ. Please feel free to visit our website. Aladdin received a life imprisonment. It was the 4th bullet from the weapon. 3 previous assassinations that occurred inside the city. There are shadows in Jerusalem where the light of the gospel of Jesus Christ is not yet shined. In these shadows on the wall, we find violence and hatred, man's inhumanity to man, reflected against the walls of the city of peace. For us who are called to the service of Christ in this city, it is essential that we struggle to come out of the shadows and proclaim the light of the gospel of Jesus Christ. Feel free to visit our website, www.ariel.org, and join us in our journey crossing the walls of the city. A few days after Paul died, the assassin was apprehended. That didn't really seem to mean very much at the time. I had gone down to the desert to fast for 2 or 3 days, and coming back, I had a real sense of the need to proclaim forgiveness, as much for my own soul and God's will, but the need to publicly proclaim forgiveness. And I brought to Jan Wilhelm Vanderhoven at the Christian Embassy a letter about who Paul was, and that his blood cried out from the streets of Jerusalem, "Father, forgive them, because they do not know what they're doing." And that he was innocent of any kind of charge somebody against him. In that process, I passed out the 2-page document about who Paul was. That his blood did cry out, "Father, forgive them." I published it around the Damascus Gate. I had a meeting with Reverend White, who was a curator of the garden tomb at the time, and in that process, you know, when you're hit to that magnitude, you really begin to think. For many, at a distance, the city of Jerusalem is a sacred place, a place where the ideals of religion come together in the hope of Abraham. For some, it's a place of pilgrimage. For others, it's a place of walls and barriers. There are shadows on the walls of the city compact together. Shadows that few tourists ever get to see.
Prophetic voice there. There was the forgiveness proclaimed.
For many, at a distance, the city of Jerusalem is a sacred place. A place where the ideals of religion come together in the hope of Abraham. For some, it's a place of pilgrimage. For others, it's a place of walls and barriers. There are shadows on the walls of that city compacted together. Shadows that few tourists ever get to see.
Prevent Israel from coming into the shame of what took place with the Intifada. And we didn't know it at the time, what we were praying for, but we had a sense of that. So, in the midst of that, Paul's assassination really cut off, the ministry. Everybody kind of scattered to the four winds. It was a very trying time, but the focus was so given to the need of proclaiming the forgiveness that we, the fact that everybody left the conference, if you will, without saying goodbye was okay. So after we left Israel, I took a 6-month sabbatical on the East Coast with my partner Richard Duffy. And then I returned to my father's house and began to work for him in the family company, handling many of the investments that he had. At that point, I pretty much compartmentalized the situation with Paul, and the forgiveness had been done. There had been a prophetic witness established, and that was sufficient. Yet in my heart, there felt like there was something empty and missing in the process there. And it wasn't so much the meaning of Paul's life, which had its own course, but later I discovered it was really the issue of my own pain. I didn't like being a victim. I didn't like having something taken from me without any cause, without any reason. And in that process, I ended up joining the United States military. I became a tank commander for an M60A3 tank, which was the main battle tank for Israel. And I really didn't have any love for Jerusalem or for Israel, for the Middle East, as a matter of fact. And I just wanted to be able to have a sense that I wasn't going to be made a victim again. Forgiveness had been there, but I needed a theology to be able to figure out, yes, I can turn my cheek. Yes, you can insult me. You can even insult my mother. And I'm not going to fight you. But if you come to harm what is mine, I will meet you. And I won't do that in Jesus' name. I'll do it in my own name, or I'll do it in the name of my country, or I will do it in the name of my state. And mankind has a right to defend itself against aggression. But that in and of itself was not adequate, and I could not understand how Islam could promote such actions as these young boys being involved with terrorist activity. So I ended up going to seminary and studying Islamics, studying cultural anthropology. I went to Fuller. So what I began to understand is I wanted to make sense of my own pain. Eventually, God brought me to a place where He could use me to maybe bring some light into the situation, to bring some hope into the situation. It was at this spot in 2002 that I was basically able to say goodbye to Paul's memory, which I had held in my heart, and complete the rest of that story as we continue.